Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Robbie, and I have the privilege of sharing with you all this morning about something that has made a huge and positive difference in my life. Today, we're going to be talking about the 12 steps and how we work them and complete them. For those of you who do not know me, I've been coming to Regroup for the last 2 years. I'm a joyfully married man, and in my free time, you'll find me spending time with my family, friends, volunteering at my church, and playing computer games. My recovery is a very important part of my life, and I've been a part of a different recovery group that meets in person in Abbotsford for the last 11 years. So currently I attend 2 groups a week, Regroup being one of the 2. I don't know about you, but for me, I find it much easier to talk about something which I have a passion and an interest in. And so I'm happy to be able to share today about the 12 steps of recovery. In my life, working these 12 steps has been one of the greatest character building and lifestyle correcting experiences that I've ever gone through. My goal with my talk is threefold. Firstly, I want to give a little bit of history on how the 12 steps came to be and what they look like today. Secondly, I want to give an overview of what each of the 12 steps does and how you know whether you've worked it properly. And thirdly, I want to describe how embarking on the 12-step recovery journey can be a life-changing event for you and can lead you into unparalleled peace and serenity. So does that all sound too good to be true? I dare you to try working the 12 steps and find out for yourself. So before I get started, I have to acknowledge this talk was heavily adapted from a talk first given by a man by the name of John Driediger. John and his wife, Linda, were the founders of a recovery meeting in Abbotsford by the name of Addiction Recovery Ministry, or ARM for short, which I joined in 2011 and which is still meeting to this day in Abbotsford. John started ARM as a retirement project after his career as a missionary, he and his wife as missionaries in Siberia, as well as traveling in South and Central America with the Jesus Film Project. John's early life up until his mid-30s was dominated by alcohol, and until he attended a local AA meeting and soon after he committed his life to Christ. John found serenity through working the 12 steps, and his entire perspective on life changed forever after doing so. John was a faithful servant leader at ARM and was a sponsor to countless men through the 12-step program up until he died from cancer 6 years ago. John was a supporter, mentor, and friend to me personally, as well as many others, and it's a privilege to continue his legacy in some small way by sharing with you all today. So let me pray as well before I jump into today's talk. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for each person that's on the call. And God, I thank you for the legacy that each of us are a part of, Lord, whether we know people all the way from Bill Wilson onwards, Lord, there's just so many people that have come before us who have prepared the way for us to know freedom in our lives. And so I pray that you would just be granting freedom to myself and to everybody else here as we continue to work through recovery, as we continue to grow. May we be just moldable, pliable, and shapeable as you guide and lead in our lives, God. In Jesus' name, amen. So, some history of the 12 steps and what they look like today. So for those of you who are not aware, what we now refer to as the 12-step program was created by members of a group that later came to be known as Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA for short. After the co-founder of AA, Bill Wilson, penned the 12 steps, they became universally accepted as an effective way to treat alcoholism. Eventually, it was discovered that these same 12 steps were actually an effective way to treat other addictions as well. This has led to the 12-step program being adapted to support those recovering from drug addiction, gambling, and sexual addiction, amongst other things. So these 12 steps were created to provide structure and direction for AA meeting attendees to work on between meetings. The idea is you would go to your meeting, and then between the time it took you to get back to your next meeting, you'd be working on these steps to keep you in the recovery mindset. The 12 steps promote change by giving us tasks that can be accomplished and by reminding us that we must do something before we can expect change in our lives. While Regroup is not a 12-step meeting, we do provide a similar supportive environment with a shared understanding that left to our own devices, we are powerless over our habitual sins of choice. Dave has talked several times about how each of us need to be working on our recovery outside of our weekly meetings, and the 12 steps are one of the best ways to do this. So here at Regroup, Dave has chosen for us to use the Steps to Freedom workbook and 2 other accompanying books by a guy by the name of Doug Weiss. The Steps to Freedom workbook uses the same 12 steps created by originally the AA founders, but it expands on each step by asking specific questions, which Doug created. There are many different 12-step workbooks, which have been created by different individuals and organizations in the recovery world, all of which have their own pros and cons based on each author's decisions, because literally each author just looked at the 12 steps and they said, I'm going to ask these questions that guide us to think about how we're going to work this step. So each one looks a little bit different, but the concepts are the same. It is ideal if all regroup attendees use the same workbook so that we can all relate and speak a shared language when it comes to working the steps. At other recovery groups that, for instance, I attend or other people may attend, they'll use different workbooks. But ARM, we use one called the Life Recovery Workbook by Stephen Arterburn. So which book our group uses is not important, but how we work the steps is. And here at Regroup, we use the Steps to Freedom. One final encouragement before we jump into what each of the steps does is to consider how we are prepared to accomplish each of these steps. Step 5 states that we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. God is willing to be our constant companion through this journey, and you are stuck living with yourself, so you carry yourself into the steps. But we are still missing another human being who we will be confessing our sins to and the things that we've done. In my opinion, the 12-step process is most impactful if another person witnesses each step of it and can guide, encourage, and correct you along the way as you go. Also, the likelihood of us completing the 12-step journey is far higher if we have someone to be accountable to, who we know is waiting to hear about our most recent progress, rather than us just doing it all on our own. So what I do in my practice before I decide to begin doing the 12 steps is I ask one man who I look up to and I want to emulate more in terms of how they live their recovery. I ask them to be my sponsor or my mentor. And that person is agreeing to meet with me 12 times over the course of, say, a year. And each of those 12 times will be me reporting the learnings that I had from step 1, step 2, step 3. I do every single one with them. It's not just step 5 and 9, as is sometimes done in other groups. I find this to be really helpful. Did you know that the word I actually does not appear in any part of the 12 steps? This is intentional, as recovery requires working together with both larger groups as well as a more intimate one-to-one working relationship in order to be truly successful. So I'll be touching on the importance of this again, but I wanted to stress the importance of sponsors or mentors at the outset, as it provides so many benefits and blessings. And it is a big commitment to be a sponsor. You're saying that I'm going to be there, I'm going to, arrange a time for us to meet up and kind of go over steps. But it really makes the experience so much more meaningful if you're reporting each and every step or a portion thereof to that person. I missed a slide. This is actually me along with two of my 3 sponsors that I've had in my lifetime. So the gentleman on the left, my wife next to him, and then the gentleman on the far right, who was another sponsor of mine. Each of these guys have worked with me on the steps in the past, and I've reported to them. And by doing so, it's deepened our relationship quite a bit. So what does each step do? Part 2. Every step in the 12 steps has a purpose, and they are listed in the order in which they must be completed. The order is significant, and each step has requirements attached to it, which we need to embody or complete before we move on to the next one. My mentor, John Driediger, who was one of the first mentors and sponsors, also attached what we call biblical comparisons to each of the steps, which I find very helpful to provide a biblical anchor for each step and why we complete them. So I'm going to be sharing each of these biblical comparisons with you as well, and I hope you find them informative. So step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. So that's the original 12 step as it's written. We at ARM have attached these biblical verses that kind of go along with it and speak the same kind of message. So the one for step 1 is, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. Romans 7:18. So this step introduces us to self-honesty and humility. We admit that we have a problem, a huge problem that we are powerless to fix on our own. We admit that we need help. That this is the step of awareness, humility, and honesty. It is a preparation for inviting spiritual healing in our lives. Admitting our powerlessness deflates our ego. And this can be a very frightening thing for us, especially someone like me who has an inflated sense of ego. In my opinion, someone coming into recovery should start their 12-step journey no more than a month, ideally, or 2 after joining. The reason for doing that is that step 1 is, and every step after it requires us to be broken enough to be willing to do whatever it takes to change. So there's a reason why we come into it broken. We need to be willing to put in the work. The longer the amount of time in between us having our worlds rocked, people finding out about our addiction, us getting in trouble, and then the distance between that and then our starting recovery, the more likely we are to listen to the lie of the enemy that tells us that we don't actually have a problem. So we all need to be broken coming into the recovery process. And if not, we're actually wasting our time, because if we're not at a place where we're willing to do whatever it takes, we can end up costing ourselves and the people that love us a lot of time. In fact, John Driediger, the man who I talked about, started up ARM, he would recognize people that came into the meeting and he would say, you know what, you're having a good time in your addiction. You go out there, you live it up. When you're ready, you come back, right? And he truly loved those people, but he realized there was nothing he could teach them until they came in actually admitting they had a problem. So it may sound harsh, but in some cases, people need to be where they're at. They need to fully experiment in their addiction. And then when they get to a certain point, that's when we're ready to help out, right? And my hope here is that everybody will realize our brokenness and our powerlessness, because really that's something that is going to be, the step actually stays with us. If at any point in our recovery we figure we've got this problem fixed, that we don't need help anymore, that's when all of our recovery kind of shatters around us. So one last thing I'm going to leave you with as well is, with each step, I find that there's certain attitudes and behaviors that may lead us back out, or that may take you out again, which just means getting back into our addiction. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see things that will take you out at step 1 is believing you don't have a problem. Each step has one of these that you can kind of bear in your mind, because it's a bit of a dangerous attitude that each one can come with. But again, yeah, if at some point we believe that we've got this licked, that we don't need help anymore, that's a dangerous, very dangerous place to be. So that's step 1. Step 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the biblical comparison that goes with that is, for it is God who's at work in you to will and to act according to his good purpose, Philippians 2:13. So what shall we do if we are powerless over a life-threatening disorder? The answer to this dilemma is step 2. Coming hot on the heels of step 1, step 2 brings us hope in the midst of our despair and brokenness. Yes, we are definitely insane and powerless on our own, but there is a greater power than ourselves that can take care of the problem. When we take this step, we acknowledge that something greater than ourselves can actually heal us. We do not have to be convinced at this point, but we just have to be open-minded to the idea. This step requires us to be brave and to grasp onto the only thing that we have left available to us. Our sin and the process of going through step 1 has cleared out all the things in life which we might have been tempted to put our trust in. Our significant other, our family, our friends, our coworkers, all of these people are likely in a process of a broken state, as the truth of our actions has come out and we are left with the repercussions associated with them. We've been caught in our sin. We've been caught by our wives and our families. The truth has come out. Everybody around us is kind of shaky, but God is still there. In the wake of all that loss, who else do we have to trust in? God is the only one that is left who is not in the process of reevaluating their relationship with us. Whether you know God or not at this point, we must choose to believe that there is a higher power greater than ourselves that can get us through this time. Put your trust in this truth and pursue seeking that power out, and he will not withhold himself from you. So a thing that would take you out again, believing that there is no hope of being free from your addiction. While we do need to be powerless in step 1, we don't need to believe that it's impossible. And that's why step 2 is so important. There is a hope. There is a possibility of getting free. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. And the biblical comparison is, therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship, Romans 12:1. So healing comes from a relationship with a higher power. To begin this relationship, we must surrender. The ego of our inside us, the ego, the pride, it hates this. This surrender begins with a decision to turn our life and our will over to the care of God. This is crucial. It is like putting ourselves in the hands of a doctor once we have discovered that we have a life-threatening disease. Note, this step can be taken even if we still have some doubts about God. No one is entirely convinced that this will work the first time they take this step. Later, as we get better, we will see the results of this step, and it'll be easier to keep making this decision to turn it over to God. So again, if you're not in a place where you are fully there with God just yet, again, just keep an open mind, and the miracle can happen. So this is a crucial step as we need to turn our lives, which I define as our life direction, our souls, our spirits, our lives. We need to be oriented towards God in such a way that we choose to pursue his way of living and know in our hearts that salvation and eternity are freely available to us. This is our North Star direction as we choose which way our ship of life will take us. On the flip side, our will is a far more complex beast to tame and requires second by second surrender to God and representing repenting of micro sins and deviances that we will continue to suffer with until the day that we die. The great news is that none of these micro sins are enough to change the course of our lives on their own, at least without a conscious decision to do so. We can rest in the knowledge that we are saved and secured, but we need to daily surrender our wills back to God when we inevitably act selfishly from our own wisdom. So again, the lives, we need to commit our life in a certain direction towards God. Our will is something that is very deviant. We keep pulling it back. We keep making it our own, and then we have to keep giving it back to God, but our life should be oriented toward him. So the thing that will take us out in step 3 is not ultimately putting your faith in God and being willing to turn our will to him, over to him moment by moment. So this is, again, the dangerous thing you want to avoid. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Lamentations 3:40. So step 4 is like a diagnosis of our problem. When doctors are looking for a cure, they begin by isolating the virus that is causing the disease. We must do the same. We must take a good, hard look at ourselves. We must isolate distorted values, thoughts, and behaviors. We must find and write about all the negative personality traits that cause our problems. We must consciously define what has to be changed and if we wish to heal. We must know that parts of ourselves that we wish to keep and which parts we want to get rid of. Some people call the 4th step a blueprint for change. The first time we take an inventory, it is difficult to identify everything we need to know about ourselves. But don't worry about this. Spend a significant amount of time asking God to reveal anything and everything that brings you any shred of guilt or conviction, and then write those things down. However, do not become paralyzed on this step. Set out a date by which you will move on, and then do so. Your list should always include yourself and God on it as well, because inevitably both you and God have been hurt by your actions. As we grow in our recovery, more will inevitably be revealed. Then you can do another set of steps later and capture anything that was missed. This may be surprising to some of you to think that the 12 steps are not a one-time process. This is not necessarily true. The 12 steps are a vital recovery tool that allows us to grow and remove certain aspects of our bondage to addiction. But since we are human, there is no such thing as a perfect working of the steps. If someone has a medical disease, do they only seek treatment once? No, they use whatever type of treatment is available to them as many times as is necessary to fully treat the issue. In the same way, I would encourage you to dispel any idea that the steps are meant to be done only once. So things that will take us out on step 1. 1 is not being thorough enough, and 2 is getting stuck and being too thorough. So there's a bit of a knife edge that we have to walk here. I know too many people that have gotten stuck on step 4. It's a very important step. I would argue it's one of the most in terms of the whole 12 steps, but there does need to be a progress through it. We can't get stuck on it. So don't let yourself get stuck on it either. Step 5, we admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. James 5:16a. In this step, we share or confess the negative information we have gathered in our 4th step. We share this information with ourselves, so getting honest with ourselves and literally talking to ourselves sometimes, with God, and with another human being. This step is designed to help us share our secrets. Secrets are a byproduct of shame, and they keep us sick. They must come out of hiding if we are to heal from them. In 12-step meetings, you will commonly hear it said that our secrets keep us sick. So this is where we absolutely need to have someone available to us who can witness our list of character defects and wrongdoings. Step 4 and 5 are perhaps the two most influential steps. And if you do not sit in front of another person and share every bit of the ugliness on the list, then you have nullified the value of the whole 12-step process, in my opinion. Sharing openly the ugliest things that we have ever done is terrifying and can feel paralyzing, but it is also absolutely necessary. This is where we also have to be very careful with who we select to be our sponsor or mentor, because they have to be shockproof, confident, and wise. Except in very specific circumstances, I would encourage that you never share your step 5 with a family member or with someone who is not involved in recovery themselves. You need someone who is not going to call the police right after you're done sharing, and someone who will not have a conflict of interest with someone that we may have listed in our inventory. Like many things in life, the scariest things that we have to face also end up being some of the greatest areas of accomplishment and growth later. The same is true here, and I do not know anyone who does not look back on their step 5 meeting as a pivotal and incredibly healing process once they've completed it. To have a brother listen silently and unjudgingly as we share our dirtiest laundry and then thank us for our honesty and give us a hug is an incredibly moving experience. So things that will take us out with step 5: not choosing the right person to share with, and not sharing everything on your list. The second is very important. Sometimes I know it can be a temptation to write out your list, and then you get there in that meeting and you're like, I don't have to share that one. Like that one's a little bit too personal. But if there's anything on that list that is causing you some like anxiety or shame or guilt or anything, that's exactly the thing you have to share. So I would encourage you, just be confident, just hope in God, put your faith in God, trust him. It'll all work out. Just share everything, get it all done, and move on. So step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. James 4:10. This step promotes readiness. We are reminded by this step that while we are consciously ready to have God remove all our shortcomings, we sometimes unconsciously cling to them out of fear and habit. When this happens, we must pray for willingness. Prayer alters our unconscious reservations. The step also reminds us that God and not us is the one who removes defects of character from our unconscious. We learned this in the second step. We let go, but God is the power behind the changes that occur in us. If you stumble on this step, don't worry. Readiness will occur when the pain is bad enough or when your faith is strong enough. Despite the phrase entirely ready, you can take this step with some reservations, or you can concentrate on some character defects while still clinging to a couple. Again, we're going through a process, and you likely should come back again later when you are combating a new facet of your addiction. I recently worked this step again personally, and it brought up some new meaning for me. There's a huge amount of value in this step as it forces us to look at the functional reasons why we have developed our character defects the way we have. There's always a reason or a motivator behind even the worst things that we do. And even when we confront aspects of ourselves that we think of semi-fondly, we can actually evaluate if there are things that we want, if these are things we want to be like in the future. For example, for me, I wrote down when I did my step 6 recently that I realized I had a sharp tongue. I liked being witty and maybe sarcastic at times, but the more I kind of played that out and talked about this with my sponsor, I realized there's no benefit to having a sharp tongue. You can be witty, that's different. You can be clever or smart or whatever. But having a sharp tongue, all that's doing is it indicates that I'm cutting someone when I'm using my tongue, right? So there's nothing positive about that. But this step is all about that. It's kind of coming to a process of being willing to let go of these things that we've held on to for a while. But again, there's reasons for why they're there. So it's good to explore why we've created that. So the thing that will take us out on this step is confusing who I am with dysfunctional behaviors and attitudes. We need to take a little bit of a hard look at who we are and be willing to put anything on the table, even if it's something that we've kind of made as a part of ourselves for a very long time. Step 7, we humbly asked him to remove all our shortcomings. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. 1 John 1:9. This gesture acknowledges the superiority of God. It reminds us that God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Just a warning, when we pray to God to remove our shortcomings, they will not magically disappear. God will just supply us with the opportunities to make changes, and hopefully we will respond with the correct behavior when those opportunities arise. God will give us a momentary reprieve from being a victim of our impulses. God will give us a choice, but the rest is up to us. This is how God removes shortcomings. We have to do the work and be willing to change the way that we otherwise live our lives. Humility is key here. Now that we have identified some of our character defects, we need to do so. We need to do it so again, and go to God in prayer and act in humility as we seek to change these behaviors and shortcomings day by day. This is a continuous journey that will last for the rest of our lives, but we will only grow in the times when we are humble and teachable. So things will take us out in step 7. Number 1, having a hard heart that does not seek God. And number 2, not walking daily in humility. Again, that humility is key. We need to keep asking for God's help, admitting that we've made mistakes and that these character defects are continuing on some level. Step 8, we made a list of all the people we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Luke 6:31. This step is designed to help us let go of guilt. It promotes honesty and change. It is an expression of our desire to put the past behind us and to start over again by acknowledging the mistakes that we have made. It is also a simple way to get organized for our 9th step. For this step, we pull out our step 4 inventory and we get busy writing down all of the examples in which we harmed a person. Write down every single name and be open to however God is going to lead you to make restitution as is appropriate for each person. For now, though, just focus on listing the people, the organizations, the businesses, or the groups that you have hurt. Your list should also include, again, yourself and God, because you have inevitably hurt both of those people. So again, this step is all about making a list. Just take that step 4 list, look at every single person that appear on that list, make sure they're all on the step 8 list, and then be ready to work on that in step 9. So things that will take us out in step 8, omitting certain people, organizations, businesses, or groups because you are not willing to make amends to them. Again, step 8 is more the comprehensive list of everything. So I would strongly encourage, don't omit anyone. Just put down everything, even if you're in a process of healing regarding a particular person and they've done a lot of things to you as well. It hasn't been a two-way. It hasn't been, just a one-way street that we've just hurt them. They've hurt us too. Just write them down. In step 9, which we're just about to talk about, we'll be discussing how to treat each one, and sometimes how we respond to each is not going to look the same. But for now, just write down everyone. Step 9, we made direct amends to people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Therefore, if you are offering gifts at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Matthew 5:23-24. This step is how we implement our desire to put the past behind us and let go of guilt. It is our opportunity to take action. It takes courage to take this step. This step is not designed to improve our relationship with all people that we have hurt, although it hopefully may for some. Nor will it always result in being forgiven by the people that we have hurt. The step is designed to help diminish the guilt that we feel. It will also help us get our self-respect back. Self-respect comes from doing the right thing, even if we don't feel like it at times. When taking this step, we must not be concerned about what the person we hurt did to us, either before or after we hurt them. This step is about taking responsibility for our actions, even if what we did was a reaction to the negative deeds of someone else. We must, what we call, sweep our side of the street, regardless of what they choose to do with their side. This step is also more than an apology. If we stole money, then we have to return the money when we can. Again, do not get stuck on this step. We have to keep moving through it. As with all other steps, it is important to do the best we can, but understand that it may not all go perfectly. There are 3 ways that we may choose to make amends with someone. The first is in person, in which we ask that person for their time and physical presence in which to apologize for what we did. The second is through correspondence, in which we do a similar thing, but just not in person. And the third way in which we make amends is to not engage with that person in any way, shape, or form in order to not cause further damage, but to pray and to confess your desire to act differently in the future to someone else and to treat people like that differently. In cases, for instance, where you may have had an affair, emotional, physical, or some other situation, it is not appropriate for you to ever see that person again. However, we need to make a commitment to never act in such a way again. Your sponsor is essential in this step, and you will work together with him to determine what style of amends is appropriate for each situation and person. Again, each situation will require a very different set of responses, but this is where, when you do your step 9 with your sponsor, you'll sit down with your list in front of you and you'll literally write down beside each name what type of amend is appropriate for that person. And you'll even set a date by which you have to get that amend done. So the sponsor is really key in this process. And I find often for me, they have insights that I don't have in terms of what type of amend should be made to a particular person. So again, super important. So things that will take us out in step 9, not making some or all of your amends. It's really easy, and this is why I think it's also very important to set a date by which these amends are going to be done. It's easy over the course of 2, 3, 4, 6 months, like to just decide, oh, I never got around to that one. Don't worry about it, whatever. But really, at the end of the day, we're doing this for us. And if there's any shred of guilt that we feel like we need to make an amends to that person and it's appropriate to do so, we need to do so, because it actually is just holding us back in our recovery. So it's very important that we make all the amends. So step 10, we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you do not fall. 1 Corinthians 10:12. This is the first of what we call the maintenance steps. Like steps 11 and 12, this step is designed to help us keep what we have gained from the first 9 steps. That includes things like self-respect, peace of mind, freedom from addiction, etc. In this step, we periodically assess how we are doing and we make note of our wrongdoings. Then we admit our mistakes and we make amends. This step is crucial if we are to avoid slips. The goal behind step 10 is that we don't ever need to do a step 4 again. We deal with as many things as possible within 24 hours of them happening. Set a time in the morning or evening to evaluate the last day and note situations where you acted inappropriately or hurtfully, and then make those micro amends to deal with it in the moment, within a short time period. Apart from the recovery benefits of this step, acting in this way is actually key to any joy-filled relationship in life. And so this practice will bring a lot of joy to your life and your interactions. When I think of the way that I interact with my wife personally, learning to take daily inventory and apologize for wrongs and not let things become, resentment snowballs for months or years down the line is huge, right? So even for those who are married or not married yet, this is an incredibly important thing to learn how to do. So things that'll take you out at step 10 is allowing issues, hurts, and resentments to fester. So again, don't let it fester. Don't let it become a resentment. Deal with it. Move on. Step 11. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Colossians 3:16. This step helps us keep and enhance our spiritual condition day by day. It does this by reminding us to practice spiritual disciplines. This is what keeps us in remission from our addiction. I really appreciate the vine and branches metaphor that's found in John 15 and elsewhere in the Bible. God is in that metaphor considered to be the vine in a grape plant kind of a thing. So he's the vine. And in the vine is this life-giving and exhilarating power and strength that I can access to empower me for daily living. I am actually a grafted on branch onto that vine that was originally destined for fire to just be burned up. And I now have the ability to receive that life-giving power in me because God has allowed me to be added onto the vine. I cannot create any of this strength on my own. And if I pull away from him, I wilt and I sway dangerously in the wind. My only job really is to cling to his vine and allow his power to keep me strong. It is a free gift, and the more I understand God's scandalous love, such as we see in things like the prodigal son story from the Bible as well, the more I love my personal relationship with Jesus. So things that take me out that could take us out at step 11 is trying to live a life again in our own strength. So step 12, the final step. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently, but watch yourself, or you may also be tempted. Galatians 6:1. To keep what we have gotten, we actually have to give it away. This is a spiritual law. Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, discovered this when he tried to keep another member, Dr. Bob, sober as a way of saving his own sobriety. How does carrying the message help us? For one thing, the comfort and advice that we give others comes back to us when we need it most. What goes around comes around. Also, we gain many new insights from our attempts to help others, and we learn from what we actually teach. So helping others also makes us feel good about ourselves, and this is good for our recovery. One warning with regard to this statement: our helpfulness should be the fruit of our faith in God and should come from a full and gracious heart. It is not a way to bolster our self-esteem or to look good, and it should not be done at the expense of our own well-being. There is a middle ground between selfishness and codependency. There is no perfect way to carry the message. Just do whatever comes naturally to you. Find a way that is exciting for you, for instance, to get involved through things like sponsorship, being an accountability partner, bringing someone to a discovery group or to regroup. There's truly no better way to continue our recovery post 12 steps than to help someone else along the road. Supporting someone else who is a few steps behind you is enriching both to you and to them. Let's not also forget the second half of the 12th step, which says to practice these principles in all our affairs. This statement reminds us to take what we have learned and apply it to all areas of our life. This means taking our recovery home with us and also to our job. A part of our recovery is being a congruent and authentic person who acts the same way in every situation. So whether you see me at work, whether you see me at home, whether you see me while I'm playing video games, I act the same way in all those situations. That's being congruent. If we are laughing at crude sexual jokes with our buddies, chatting up the secretary at the doctor's office or the cashier at the store, and then mentoring a younger brother in recovery, something is very wrong. So again, we need to live congruent lives. Our lives are meant to be lived in a way where we can be proud of our conduct in every scenario that we find ourselves in, so that no one can question our actions and our relationship with God. So things that will take us out at step 12 is one, living a double life. Again, you put on a certain face when you're with certain people or when you're at church or recovery, and then you have a different lifestyle everywhere else. And the second thing that keeps us stuck or takes us out again is keeping our recovery to ourselves. It was never something that was meant to be just for us. It's meant to be, we're kind of a daisy chain of people just helping the guy behind us. We get helped by the person in front of us and we help the person behind us, and we just continue it on like that. So yeah. So part 3 then, almost done. How can the 12 steps be a life-changing experience for me or for you? Working a thorough set of steps is a key, and we need to take adequate time to fully complete each one before proceeding on. Conversely, we cannot allow ourselves to stall. And so while we want to be thorough, we also need to complete the whole 12 steps to achieve the full benefits of this process. The 12 steps are actually not necessarily a one and done process. So be as thorough as you can, but don't paralyze yourself by expecting perfection. The first time going through the 12 steps should bring about some big life changes, but the 12 steps can also be completed as a tune-up exercise again at a later time to further grow and develop. Some people read through the entire Bible once per year. Others that I know complete the 12 steps again every year as a way of keeping them focused on their lifetime journey of recovery. Let me be real with you. Going through the process of completing a 12-step process is actually not enjoyable, but then again, treatment never is or is never meant to be. In a similar way to a cancer treatment, the 12 steps are made to surgically and chemically remove and destroy the effects of decades of sin and defects that have built up under the surface of our lives. Therefore, the 12 steps are not something to be completed lightly, but the healing and the growth that will occur once you are done will far outweigh the pain and work involved in the process. God never wastes a hurt. And even if there are scars left over from where brokenness once existed, you can be grateful for the change that has since occurred. Having made poor choices in our lives, we can be an example to others and model how to live a changed life by God's grace. For me, there have been so many benefits of doing the 12 steps, the largest of which is a lack of shame, which used to be a weight that I carried with me every second of every day. This shame was crippling and would lead me to undervalue myself and to regard myself as worthless or even less than worthless. The first time I did my step 5, and shared my inventory with an older man who was my sponsor, was beautiful. He heard the worst that I had ever done. He saw the tears flow down my face and my repentant heart, and he encouraged me in my time of vulnerability. In the hours and days after that experience, I felt as light as air, and I realized that the weight I had been carrying for so long was gone. What shame do you carry today? You can experience this freedom too by working the 12 steps. Another benefit of completing the 12 steps is authentic camaraderie. Those who have been close to me in recovery know me in ways that others do not. The relationship that I have made with a few close men whom I share nothing else in common with, apart from recovery, apart from our shared addictions, are rich and meaningful. Do not try and walk this journey alone or complete the 12 steps alone, as you will not succeed. As you complete the steps and get to know your sponsor, hold on to that relationship and be ready to be a sponsor for a newer person in recovery and share the gift of your presence and experience with them. Another incredible benefit of completing the 12 steps is the deepened relationship with God that you will experience. There is something so powerful about reading the names of the individuals on your amends list out loud to God and asking God to bless each one and to heal their heart of the things that we have done to them. We become fully honest with God in a way, just in that way, by asking him in prayer, for things in prayer. Just by asking God to do things for us at the end of the night is not a way to get close to him. But when we truly see the filth and depravity of our lives, his goodness, purity, and grace shines brighter than any light that we have ever seen up until then. For me, one process or one experience that I had in recovery that was very meaningful was probably after I'd done my first set of steps, but a couple years in, I was actually in church on a Good Friday service, and I was just kind of really disconnected from what was going on in the rest of the service. And I went to church in a very depressed state. I just had a black hoodie on, and I just sat up in the the bleachers of the church in the back, didn't talk to anybody. And I just kind of thought about, who I was, my sin, my shame, my guilt, all that kind of stuff. And I had this image. I don't want to call it a vision, because I wouldn't say I've ever had a vision per se, but I had this beautiful image, which was just that I was in a courtroom scene, and there was a person reading out a list of every sin that I had ever committed. And they just kept reading off list after list after list. And it was just, endless, so long and stuff like that. But every time this image would read out one of my sins, this character of Jesus would stand up in the booth next to me and would say, I would take it. And so another thing we read, and he would say, I would take it. Another thing, I would take it. And so in my image, my whatever, like, I was getting really upset because I was like, hey, he can't take that. This is me. I'm the one who's done all these things. Why is he taking it? But again, in this image, God was both the judge who was kind of like receiving all this information, but he was also behind me, and he gave me a hug, and he said, this is how it has to be. Like, this is how I meant it to be. And so he just gave me a hug while Jesus just again and again said, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. And so I just was sitting there just flowing down, like tears coming from my eyes, and just like being completely, amazed by the truth of what it is that we kind of have, that we can claim in this whole recovery journey, because all of this is taken for us if we want it to. And so that was an incredible experience that I would say my recovery prepared me to realize, and it's something that I carry with me from there. So finally, as God affects huge change in our lives, this also enables us to be used in positive ways that we were never able to be used in before. This process is exciting, but also scary for those of us who once regarded ourselves as useless for work in God's kingdom. For myself, I have been able to share my testimony with hundreds of people in Canada, the USA, and Cuba, just by going through recovery and getting the opportunity to travel in those places. My story is simply a recounting of how my own foolishness got me in trouble, and then how God saved me from a helpless and hopeless situation. I believe you have a similar story to tell as well. We as addicts have a responsibility to come alongside one another and provide hope and encouragement to continue on the journey for others and for ourselves. So in closing, I hope that you will, as Christian AA members say, pair the big book, which is the 12 steps, with the good book, which is the Bible. Put them together and use them both. Use the two together to refine your heart, behaviors, and lifestyle. Give God access to every corner of your life and be courageous. Jump into the opportunity that the 12 steps provide, but don't do it alone, and don't let yourself get stuck. If you need help getting started with the 12 steps or continuing onwards, feel free to reach out to myself, Dave, or anyone else who's completed the steps already. God bless you as you continue surrendering to God's work in your life day by day. Thanks.